Welcome to the Women's Circle Interviews. Our circle interviews are designed to model possibility, increase creativity, tap into intuition, and create a network of global connection to light up the world. It's only when you realize what's possible for you that you're able to step into who you are meant to be and build the business and life of your dreams on your own terms. You are truly magnificent and designed to live a life worthy of you. It's never too late to start. Are you ready? Let's dive right in. My guest today is Molly Christensen. Molly is a joyful mother and passionate homeschooler of 7 amazing children. She has a degree in mechanical engineering, has founded multiple homeschool co-ops, written mounds of curriculum, taught classes to youth and adults. She's the owner of Building Heroes Academy and the author of How to Get Everything Done. She's passionate about sharing her love of learning and encouraging others on their journey to greatness. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I've been crossing your path for such a long time, so it's really great to see what you're up to and really share that. You sound like extremely busy, 7 children, crazy. And a founder of Building Heroes Academy. So can you tell us more about how did you develop that vision? It seems like you're so busy. How can you make that all work together?
Yeah, for sure. I quite truthfully, I never actually thought I would have 7 kids, first off, but I just like them so much. But yeah, I mean, having a lot of kids definitely makes you busy, but it also forces you to look at your priorities and where to put your focus. And so early on, I had started getting these thoughts that I should homeschool my son when he was about 4. And I said, no way, because first off, I am so disorganized and I wouldn't even know how to do this. And like you mentioned, I have a degree in mechanical engineering, and I'm like, you know what, rocket science would be more comfortable for me than teaching my own kids. And so I pretty much just said, no, I'm not going to do this because I'm a mess. The homemaking thing, that's tough for me. And then I have to add homeschool on top of that. So I didn't do it. I put him in kindergarten, and as I was watching what they did there, I started to think, yeah, maybe I could do this. And so I pulled him out for first grade. And in first grade, it was rough. It was really, really hard because I was thinking that if I'm going to homeschool, then I need to make this oldest child of mine here like a genius. I have to teach all the things. He's got to be way ahead, and to prove to myself and everybody that I could do this.
Right.
But as I kept going, I realized this is not going to work because you can't make kids learn. You just really cannot. You can definitely do things to encourage it, but it really isn't an effective way to make people learn. You just can't do it. So as I started studying and figuring this out and still being a mess, I finally realized that it's really all about me learning how to discipline me and me leading the way and being the example for the type of kids that I want my kids to be. And so as I started doing that, I started getting more clear on what education was really all about and why I was really homeschooling, and that it was really all about focusing on each child so that they could learn how to navigate life, so that they could learn how to go on their own journeys. But in order for them to do that, I had to figure out how to do it myself first. And so as I started doing that, getting the clarity, that's how I started figuring out how to balance everything too, because a lot of the distractions could just go away. A lot of the fears, a lot of the worries, because I had such a more clear vision of what it was that I really wanted to do and where I wanted to guide my kids and my family. And so the beautiful thing is the kids, they do get older, they do get more self-sufficient, and then, you don't have to do everything for them anymore, and you can trust them because they are amazing people and they do want to do good things. And so that's kind of just a little bit about my journey, about how I can balance all of this, and how, once I figured all this stuff out, well, not all of it, but a lot of it, then I could start sharing it with other people too. And that's how I could run a business too at the same time.
Right. Yeah, my journey is actually very similar, though I only have 2 children, but the same, like I navigated the school system and then thought, maybe they were better at home. But we also, because we traveled before COVID, so being in a school made it a little bit harder. So we integrated, traveling with, doing everything at home. And the same as you, it's just learning as you go. And when you start, it's like this hair pulling experience, but you start to establish this routine and things just start to fall into place. And like you said, they are, self-reliant. They are, they're responsible, and you can trust them to do what they're supposed to be doing. So that's amazing that you're doing that with 7. So you called your academy Building Heroes Academy because you emphasize that you build heroes. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, for sure. So sometimes, I think that when we think about heroes, we think about Superman, superheroes that are out there to save the world. But that's not really what I'm thinking here. What I'm thinking is the context is we're here to serve other people in the world. We don't have to save it, so that's good. It takes a lot of pressure off because we're not superhumans, so we can't be superheroes, but we can be human heroes who help other people. But the reason why I named it that is because one of the big things that came into my life, I guess we could say, is the pattern of the hero's journey. And it really was life-changing in the way I could view my life and see my life. And so I'd heard of the hero's journey before, like in my AP English class, which is this pattern that Joseph Campbell came up with, and he realized he'd been studying all the myths of the world, and he realized that all these stories had a similar pattern to them, even though they were in all different places and times. So like the ancient Egyptians had their stories, and the ancient Greeks and the ancient Native Americans, they all had these stories. They didn't know about each other, but they were all based on this pattern of the hero's journey. I mean, they weren't based on that. That's what Joseph Campbell pulled out and said, wow, these are all very similar. They all have these same elements. And the reason why is because people tell stories to learn, and people tell stories to figure out their world and to explain their world. And so when all these ancient myths are all telling the story of the hero's journey and how an ordinary person becomes a hero, what it does is it makes life predictable, and it helps us see ourselves in that pattern so that we too can have a better method for going on our own life journeys, and so that we can have more predictability. Not fortune telling, we don't know all the details, but we generally know,
That's so interesting because, I've noticed that too, that pattern. And I didn't necessarily relate it to my children's journey, but I know that everyone is on their own hero's journey. And I know that I find myself, naming it like, oh, this is the refusal of the call, but, he's just building up courage to answer the call, right? It's not the pull is not strong enough yet. Like I find myself noticing that pattern in other people. I haven't brought that to the schoolroom. So that is like so incredibly wise. I'm going to have to start noticing that, what's going on at home.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I started seeing that shifted everything for me. It's like, I do not have to push my children on the path that everybody else says they have to go on, but there, all I have to do is teach them how to listen to those calls to action that they are getting to do good, but they often can't hear those calls to action if they don't know. They don't have to know the proper terminology, but
right.
Just putting it in the context of the hero's journey helps them so much recognize what's happening, and just having that pattern, like I said, makes life more predictable. So that's why I named my company Building Heroes Academy, is because it's all based on learning how to homeschool using that pattern in life, so that you can prepare your kids for their journeys. And their journeys may not look exactly like we think they should. And that's part of the reason why it's so hard, because we think we need to make our kids go on the journey that we think they should go on. But they're individuals, and sure, there's certain things that might be really good for them that will help them on their journey, but ultimately they need to learn how to navigate their own life journey, because it's their life.
Right. Yeah, it's all about noticing the patterns. Like, even they have a unique signature, right? And it's just helping them along that. So giving them what they need to pursue that journey, making sure that their backpack is full. Yeah. That's amazing. That is phenomenal. So how long would you say it took to get, like, from the kids are in kindergarten to that point where, wow, like, we're going on this hero's journey?
Probably way longer than I wish it would have, but that was part of my journey. And because it took me so long to figure this out, that's why I'm like, I got to teach this, because it can help so many people, right? So, I mean, it probably took me a good 10 years just to get into the swing of things, I think.
Wow.
And then,
but I mean, the 10 years is you having done the call, surmounted the obstacle. So even though you're going to say, oh, it took 10 years, but really you were on that journey that time. That's just when you beat the dragon, kind of thing, right? Like it's a journey for you too, like you said.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, especially for homeschool moms, we tend to think that, and probably just any moms really in parenting, but we tend to think that, well, okay, I've researched everything, I figured this out, I've decided to act. So then we tend to think, okay, it's going to be really easy now. So then when the obstacles come up, which they do because it's part of the journey, we start thinking, oh, I'm not cut out for this. I'm doing something wrong. I must not be meant to do this. And that's the beauty of the hero's journey. It's like, no, the obstacles are there to help you learn and grow and figure out how to really do this. You can make all the plans you want, but until you put it into practice, you really don't know how to do it. It's taking the action that helps you grow and learn and become better, and grow into that person that you want to become. And so just knowing that pattern, it helps a lot, because when you hit the obstacles, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means there's something else there for you to learn to become better, so that you can serve other people more effectively.
Right. They're challenges of life, like any other challenge. And you just, you learn to overcome it. Doesn't mean quitting. So if there was a mom or a dad on the fence about homeschooling, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to listen very carefully to the calls to action that you're getting, but then even more important, listen to the refusals, because you mentioned this, and we didn't really go over what the hero's journey is. So, if you want to look that up, there's some good videos explaining that. But a hero always gets a call to action. A call to action is going to be something that takes you out of your comfort zone. So that's uncomfortable, because taking you out of your comfort zone, but it's also going to be something that's going to help you progress and grow and help others, right? So if you are feeling like maybe you want to homeschool, and you're thinking about it, and maybe you're not feeling like you actually want to homeschool. So, I mean, going back to my experience, I got the thought that I should homeschool my son, but I didn't feel like I wanted to. Okay. So sometimes the feelings can get very confusing there. It's at that point where if you start looking at the refusals, because you will get refusals because your brain wants to keep you in your comfort zone. Yes. Because that's comfortable, right? But to really decide, is this something that's worthwhile to step out of my comfort zone and move into? You look at what those refusals are and see if those refusals are just trying to keep you comfortable. And usually that's the case. So, for example, some of my refusals were, I don't know how, because it's more comfortable to not know how, right? I don't have time because I was so busy being disorganized. I might look weird, because homeschoolers are weird, is the stereotype, right?
But not anymore.
that's
quite
right.
Popular.
Yeah, well, we're trying to break that for sure. but
I mean, with the pandemic, there's a lot. I know a lot more people anyway now thinking I'm ahead of my time as opposed to really behind. So I think things are changing.
Things are definitely shifting, which is great, but we still have it in our collective consciousness that, yeah, they might be weird. But typically, when you're going to follow a call to action that's going to get you out of your comfort zone, people probably will think you are doing things a little differently, and they may have their own opinions, and that's okay too, because that's part of the pattern as well. So, so that's just some of the refusals that I had. And when I started looking at those, I mean, back then I did not know about the hero's journey. I did not know that was what was happening to me. But I think that, looking at it in that context of it being a call to action and then looking at the refusals are gold, because that shows you where you are stopping yourself from progress. Right. And really, our whole life is about progress. If we're not moving forward and we're not choosing to get out of our comfort zone to do those things, then we're going to keep ourselves stuck. We may think we're comfortable, but we're actually not comfortable because we're not moving. So if there is a parent that's thinking about homeschooling and it's in their mind, and it also goes into your heart too, you kind of want to, but you kind of don't, I would look at those reasons that you're giving yourself and say, am I just not doing it because I'm scared? Am I just not doing it because I'm afraid I'll mess up? Am I just not doing it because this, or that? And then just say, but if I were brave and I took action, could I do it? Could this help my family? Could it help us move forward? And just look at it from that context and then be brave.
Yeah. And for people that are concerned about like messing up their kids or failing, is that even possible?
I think it could be possible, but I think in most cases, the reality is if you love your kids enough to actually homeschool them, like I guess, what am I trying to say here? If you're willing to put in the time and make the effort, you're not going to mess them up and you're not going to fail them. You're going to make mistakes though, for sure. Yeah. But that is part of the journey and that is part of the process. And that's something that our kids learn from us is, how does mom and dad, how do they deal with mistakes? What happens when they run into an obstacle? And that is a huge life learning lesson right there. They're not thinking of it exactly in those terms, but they were watching us to see if it's okay to make mistakes. Is it okay to not be perfect? Is it okay to keep learning and growing?
Right. And did you do this like all by yourself, this 10-year journey discovering by yourself, or did you reach out to other homeschoolers or other resources?
That is such a good question. So I did have other homeschool friends, and that's the wonderful thing about homeschooling is that there are plenty of other moms and families and parents who want to help you out because they know how hard it is to do something that's against the mainstream, even though, like you said, it's getting a little more common. But at the same time, I was a bit of a DIYer. I thought that I had to do everything by myself. So I think that's a big myth, is that when we start homeschooling, we think, oh my word, I have everything on my shoulders. I have to teach my kids everything. How I've got a 6-year-old, how am I going to teach them high school math? That's such a non-issue once you start doing it, and we start wondering, how is this kid ever going to make it? But that's just our own fears coming up, because we think we have to do it all ourselves, and we definitely do not. I like to think of myself as more of a facilitator. I'm looking out for the best educational opportunities out there for my kids. I don't have to teach them everything, and in fact, they're going to learn so much on their own. And it's always so fun. I'm like, well, where did you learn that? I didn't teach you that. And like, oh, from this or this or that, or from a different sibling. It's like, no, you don't have to teach everything yourself to your kids, which is really, really freeing.
Yes.
Yeah, so I had friends who were on the journey with me, and this is like part of the hero's journey as well. You have those allies who are right there with you. They're going along the path, and they can support you. They understand what you're going through. But then you also, a part of the hero's journey is having a mentor too. And a mentor just means it's somebody who's been where you want to go. They're farther along the path. Doesn't mean they're perfect at it or whatever, but that they have seen a few things so that they can help you with a shortcut. They can give you maps, and they can give you tools for your backpack as well. And that's one thing. I did have some mentors, but that's one thing that I wish I would have known earlier on, is to take advantage of mentors, of people who have been there, done that, who could have helped me. But I was kind of stuck in that DIY mode. But that was
it's really hard. We think we can do it all on our own. I can totally relate to that. But Building Heroes Academy is a community, right? So like you do have other people participating in that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I started Building Heroes Academy as a curriculum, actually, first, because what I wanted to do was flip the educational model, so that instead of focusing on making sure that my kids learn this, this, and this at this certain time, I flipped it so that I'm focusing on the individual child, so that we're focusing on building the character, and teaching success principles so that they know how to navigate the journey, right? But at the same time, I was like, well, we kind of do still want to learn the academics. So why not use the academics as a tool to spark their learning, and to spark their learning of principles, and making information relevant, instead of just studying it for the test, which you then immediately forget afterwards, since it's no longer relevant, right? Yeah. So, and also having 7 kids, that does make you really busy, and also always being an entrepreneur, and I was always starting businesses and stuff too. I didn't have a whole lot of time, so I wanted to be able to see if we could cover the basics and just have that foundation built in an hour a day. So that's what I did with the curriculum, is like, we have family style learning in an hour a day, where we are focusing on learning the skills for our journey, but we're using academics as the tool to do it. And it really only takes an hour a day, because it's so interesting and you don't have to repeat it so much.
Right.
So that's where I started with the curriculum. And then I've added on we have a free Facebook group, and I also have a membership group too as well, where people can just really get close to their allies and have me as their mentor to help guide them through and help build that foundation, that strong foundation in your home for building heroes. Because as we all know, once you get started homeschooling, it's really not all about the curriculum. Like, the curriculum is a tool, but that's usually, as new homeschoolers, our first thing is what curriculum should I use? Yeah. But then as you get going, you realize it's really not about the curriculum. It's really about building your life, your homeschool life, into a safe environment for them to learn and grow and practice and go on their own journeys as well. So that's what we do in the membership, is we're very systematic in building up that foundation for the kids to learn how to go on their own journeys.
So you touched base on the repetition, which is an important point too, because, and you said it's so interesting that you don't have to repeat as much. And it's really interesting, and I think an important point, because people think, you know, the school day is from 8:30 to 3:30. Like, I don't have that kind of time, but they use repetition, right? Like like the things keep coming back, keep cycling back around. Whereas at home, like you said, if it's a lot more interesting, you don't need to fill in that space, that time. You can do it in a much shorter time.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is, education is not the filling of a bucket, but the lighting of a fire. And yes. and when we look at public schools, and that's what we do for our model for education, and that's what I did when I first started too. I was having my son go from like 9 to 4 every day, and he's 6, and the house was falling apart, and I couldn't keep that going. That's the fast track to burnout. Okay. Yes. So that's because schools do use a lot of repetition, because they figure it's more efficient with a classroom, because eventually then most of the kids will get it. If we just keep repeating it, we'll keep repeating it, right? And repetition is a way that our brains can learn. But the other way that modern neuroscience is showing us these days, which is really cool, in the last 20 years, we've had so many such good technology that they can, you know, measure what's going on in our brains. They're finding though too, though, is that when you have good feelings about something, you will learn so much faster and so much deeper, and you will remember it better. So yes. If you use those kind of learning techniques where the kids just light up, that's the lighting of the fire, we don't have to keep repeating it so much at all. And that's why we truly can cover everything in just an hour a day. And then after that, with their minds activated and lit up, they can go off and work on their own projects, and they will keep learning because it's relevant to them. It's their projects, and kids learn so much through play too. And they don't have enough playtime in our modern society.
No, exactly. When I started, actually, I was introduced to Charlotte Mason. I don't know if that came across on your journey, but she advocated like 6 hours outside, children out to be 6 hours outside. They learn in nature, they see patterns and, you know, everything growing. And nowadays children are never outside. They're on their tablets inside. So to me, that was a big thing. Like, how do we integrate this outside time? Because it really seemed like it was important. And I know when I was a kid, we've spent a lot more time outside than children do today.
Yes, Charlotte Mason, I love her teachings, especially about short lessons. And that's one thing that I did, is I put in the curriculum, I made really short lessons, because if you start getting bored, you're not learning, right? And so, yeah. but at the same time, we start feeling like, no, you have to learn this. So come on, pay attention, right? So, you know, the question is how do we get our kids outside for 6 hours a day? And that's not super practical in our modern world for many of us, because we don't have a place to go. However, we can still do things to set up in our home to encourage that. Like, for example, boundaries. If we don't have boundaries on the usage of media and technology, because that's probably the biggest thing that stops them from going outside, yes. Then they're not going to go outside, right? And so for us, we have discussions about being a producer and a consumer of technology. And I also watch and notice, okay, so backing up, I used to think, well, it'd be great if my kids never, ever got on technology. That's not realistic in this world. It really just isn't. So I said, let's teach them how to use it properly. And so we'll watch. I'll ask them, how much time do you think is reasonable for you to spend on the computer today? My younger kids, I try really hard not to give them very much because they don't have the skills. My teenagers, 12 and up, they're probably going to need to spend a little more time on the computer. But I'll work with them, help them figure this out, how to manage it. And you know, it's a hard one because it's even hard for adults to manage too. Yes. Right? But I think putting it in the context of producer and consumer helps a lot, because if we are heroes on the hero's journey and we're trying to make progress and move forward, we're going to be using technology as a tool to produce, to do good, to progress and move forward. If we are just consuming it, and sure, we're all going to want to just numb sometime and scroll through Facebook and watch a Netflix video, right? But it's just that we need to be aware of how we're using it in our own life. Yes. And so, so helping our kids see that bigger picture and the vision of who they can become can help them manage the technology as well. So right. I also just make sure we have a lot of opportunities to go outside. I know, you know, in some places we have lived, we didn't really have much of a backyard, so we'd have to be more creative and go to the park or something. But even here, like, or nowadays, we have a nature group. So we get out into nature with our nature group, and they complain every single time. But once we get there, they love it. And you can light up and you can see them connect. It resets them, and it's so good.
And then they don't want to come home.
And it's worth it. Not that I'm making them go, but I'm just gonna go.
Right. Yeah. Like facilitating the going. Yeah. It's, I mean, to me, it's part, like I tell them, it's part of a healthy lifestyle, right? Like you need sunshine, you need fresh air. So it's part of our daily routine. But I know it's the same as you, like they'll complain every single time, oh, do we have to, but then they don't want to come home. Then it's like on the other side of the whole, like, do we have to go home? So I know. So I'm happy to do it because I know they're gonna love it. And to me, my heart is always bouncy when I'm out there, like just watching them just take off, and they love being there. So
me too. And actually the funny thing is sometimes I don't feel like going, so I can actually understand their feelings as well. Yes. So I'll just say, just remember, when we get out there, we love it, and we're always glad we went. Yes. So sometimes I just have to remind them of that too. But yes, it is really important, especially I think in this day and age, that we get out of our houses.
And I think that falls back on the comfort, because you feel comfortable, it's warm, or you know, you're sitting and you're comfortable, you don't feel like moving, and even though you know you really enjoy it when you're there, you're comfortable right now. Why mess with that? But we've never regretted it. Like I don't remember a single time where they said, oh, I wish we stayed home.
Yeah, yes, I agree. And I mean, getting out in nature is uncomfortable because it's not your comfort home, but also there's bugs, you know, and it could rain and it could do all these things, but that's just another great pattern for learning how to deal with the obstacles in life. We can, you know, one time we went on this hike, it was the middle of June, and it turned out to be a lot longer hike than we had thought. And it's June, right? So we were not prepared for when it started to hail. We're like, what? Where did this come from? But at the same time, it's just like what I was talking about earlier. Our kids watch us, and they watch to see how we react. So if I had started complaining and groaning and moaning, that's likely would have made that experience a very bad one for them. But instead, we were like, wow, this is awesome. It's hailing in June. This is fun. When do you ever get that opportunity? You know, so a big part of it is too, Mom.
Yes.
He reacts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know. I mean, for me, it's been bugs. I have tried to like, oh, there's a spider. Look at that. To not react because I'm kind of a screamer, or I was before having children. With children, I've been very controlled. But lately, there's an abundance of rats, I think, because of all the restaurant closures. And that I have not abstained from screaming.
But that's okay too, because that's part of the journey. And you can say, look, guys, I'm going to take a picture or whatever. You know what I mean? And you can learn to overcome that fear. And what a great example for your kids that would be, because
Yes,
you are persistent and you keep going back out there, even though there are some things comfortable.
exactly. So my last question was how to build confidence, or how to give other moms confidence, or dads, whoever is homeschooling, like how to give them that confidence that, I mean, as long as they're like you said, they love their children and they're doing their best, that they're really not going to fail. They're not going to fail their children.
So building confidence is an interesting thing because, you know, you can never be 100% confident, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you can always be building that confidence. And the best way that I've learned how is really to start trusting yourself, because you have these kids, you're trusted with these kids, and you are going to get the answers that you need to help them move forward on their journeys, and the answers you need for your journey as well. And so to build confidence, my main advice would be to start training yourself to listen to your calls to action. Because
Right.
once you start listening to your calls to action, even if they don't make sense and they are uncomfortable, and you start following those, you are going to feel so much more confident that you can trust yourself, because you find that you are getting good calls to action. You are a good person. You do desire good. And like sometimes I know that moms especially will do this to themselves. They will write this big long list of to-dos,
Uh,
and then you'll cross off one or two, but then you have to add five more on because they keep popping on. And maybe this is a physical list, but maybe this is just in your brain, but this is kind of how it works.
yeah.
And so by the end of the day, you are like, I didn't get anything done. My list is longer than when I started. And you go to bed feeling absolutely worthless because you did not accomplish anything. So we need to reframe this whole story here, because you're when you just decide that you are enough first, that you are good, you have good desires, because guess what? If you go look at that list of things to do, it was all good desires. You didn't write yell at my kids on there, fail
Right.
my kids. No, it was all good things to help people, right? So you decide first that you are good, and then you get what you can get done during the day, because we do, I mean, we probably shouldn't do this, but we do. As human beings, we rate our self-worth based on what we got done, right?
Right.
And as moms, it's extra difficult because there are no accolades, and nobody's patting you on the back for changing the baby's diaper or not yelling. And so that's one reason why it's just so hard that way. But at the end of the day, what's really the most important is, did you tune in and listen to any calls to action? Because these are other things that pop up during the day in the moment. And did you do them? And
Right.
you have to give yourself a fair evaluation before you go to bed at night, and just say, okay, so I didn't do this, which is usually what we're all focused on. I didn't do this, this, and this. I'm failing my kids. My son's way behind. My daughter was biting the other kid. That's usually where our brains go. But if we can shift it and just say, okay, some of these things happen, there's room for improvement. That's good. That means I'm still a human here on the journey and I can still progress. But then what did I do good? And give ourselves that fair assessment. Did I listen to a call to action today? Have I figured that out? Can I trust myself? And then when you go to sleep, And I guess the other part too, I want to add in there too, is gratitude. You can add in some gratitude things, some things to be grateful. And then when you go to sleep, you don't have to be beating yourself up all night long, because that's what most of us do when we go to sleep at night. We are beating ourselves up the entire night long because we're thinking of all the terrible things we did or didn't do during the day. And then you wake up the next morning feeling totally unmotivated because, well, you're such a mess. Why try? So
Right.
if you want confidence, I know I just threw in a whole bunch of different concepts there. You, number one, I'll just summarize here. Decide that you are good, because you are. Obviously, you keep trying to do good things. You just have to look at your to-do list. It's good. Okay. And then number two, throughout the day, you start training yourself to listen to those calls to action to do good. And maybe I should have given an example, but you are always getting thoughts to do good, but a lot of times we don't recognize them because of the refusals, and the refusals make sense. But if
Right.
we do good things, that builds confidence in yourself that you can do this. And then the number three thing is go to bed grateful. Go to bed thinking good things about yourself. I'm doing a crazy sign. Maybe it is crazy, but be thinking good things about yourself and your day, and choose to put gratitude thoughts in your head before you go to sleep, because you're going to wake up feeling so much better about life if you do that.
So you didn't say this expressively, but what I heard is that you're reframing really from a to-do list to like a mission statement, like more focusing on values. So you might not have gotten all 26 questions of math done, but did you instill the values that you wanted to instill? Like as far as you kept calm when you had to repeat for the 5th time, like an exercise, or putting a lot more emphasis on what do you want at the end of the day to feel, which goes down to the gratitude, which to me is like a mission statement, like having this family mission statement. And if you stayed true to those things, then that was a successful day. Check it off. It doesn't matter what.
Yes, and even if you messed up,
yes,
even if you lost it,
because you're aware. You're aware of messing up. The awareness of messing up means you are still holding true to that value. You didn't abandon it.
Exactly. And you can also still be grateful that you get to try again.
Yes.
And
another day.
For the awareness too, like you said.
Yeah. That is so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us today, and for joining me on this interview and journey. It was great catching up with you. You can find out more about Molly's work and her amazing homeschool curriculum on her website, buildingheroesacademy.com. Check below the video for the link. If you haven't already, be sure to join our women's circle, Awaken Feminine, to reclaim your authentic voice through play. We meet to create connection, elevate and celebrate each other through games and exercises geared to tap into our intuition and give voice to our longings and desires. If you have a gift you want to share with the world, I encourage you to schedule an interview with me so I can help you spread your unique message and perspective. You don't need any superpowers or be well on your way. You just need to have an idea, a vision, or a direction that you think will inspire others. And if no one told you today, I want you to know that you're amazing. Continue to live with passion, purpose, and presence. The world needs to see your light shine brightly as an example to others of what is possible for them also.